Welcome back into the Morning Rush. Our next guest, NBA draft, NBA cover, and college basketball over the Athletic, Sam Vecenie now joins us. Sam, appreciate the time. I want to start with Mason Jones. I saw that you commented on his post a while back when he announced that he was signing with the CAA and foregoing his senior year to go to the NBA draft. You were expecting this. Why did you expect Mason Jones to stay in the NBA draft?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's just been kind of heading this way, talking to people around, college basketball, around the NBA. It's been heading this way since basically February, I would say, is around the time that I've heard that he was more likely to go than to stay in college basketball next season. And on his part, I think it's pretty understandable. I mean, I'm just not sure what more he's going to be able to do next season. I mean, I don't quite think he should have necessarily won SEC Player of the Year, but he also averaged 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists a game. And, from an offensive production standpoint, it's really hard to top what he did this year. So I'm just kind of looking at it. And in that case, when you hear from NBA teams that it's more likely that he's going to go than he's not going to go, and you look at it from his standpoint, and he's got to be thinking, man, what more do I have to do to get on NBA radars? I think it's kind of expected. Plus, he's going to be 22, if I remember correctly, here coming up in, I think it's like July or August. So, it's a little bit older, and it's time to go pro, basically.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and I've mentioned this several times, Sam. I know you don't follow recruiting as heavily, but Arkansas's got a top 5 recruiting class coming in, a couple pretty highly coveted grad transfers, so they're going to have some guys. They're going to take some looks away from him this season, so that's a great point from you. I remember...
Yeah, that's 100% right. I mean, like, Moses Moody's awesome. Moses Moody is going to get some shots next year. So, KK Robinson's going to be good. If Isiah Joe comes back, he's going to be really good. So it's definitely a situation where there are going to be fewer shots to go around. And again, if you're Mason Jones, what else do you have to do?
Sam, I want to come back to something you said just a minute ago. I think I heard you say you didn't think Mason Jones should have won SEC Player of the Year. Is that what you said? If so, why do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think that it's a similar reason to why his draft stock is not as high as what I think that the production would dictate, is maybe the way to put it. I thought he was abysmal defensively this year. I don't really even think that there's a defense for his defense, the way he played defense this year. It was inattentive. It was just so many times it kind of looked like he was walking around the defensive side of the court and not really paying nearly enough attention. I didn't think he was a particularly good on-ball defender. And, it's kind of crazy because you look at the family lines. I mean, like Matt Jones was at Duke and was an incredible wing defender, and it just doesn't seem that kind of mentality kind of filtered down to Mason. I do think he has some deficiencies, like he's not an elite-level lateral mover. He's definitely more of a guy who's thicker and gets into the paint and bullies other guys and draws fouls that way to get a lot of production, right? But and then in terms of the way that translates on defense, he's not going to be able to move and slide his feet laterally all that well. But at the end of the day, I think that production speaks for itself, and I'm comfortable saying that he should be all SEC. But I think that there were some better guys in the SEC this year that I would have been happy to give the award to.
So few, if any, have made the case that he should come back, and you laid out a lot of defensive deficiencies he could work on. If you were going to make the case for him to return to Arkansas for another year, which is out the window, would it be primarily to become a better defender? Is there any room for his offensive game to go to another level?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is defense. I would say just, Mason's a kid that was heavier early in his life, right? Like, if I remember correctly, he was right around like 250, 260 pounds at one point in his life. And I think that, he's focused a lot on, really slimming down and getting his body into great shape. And I wonder if there's just continued work that he could do on his body to maybe continue to improve that lateral quickness. Maybe instead of, slimming down, trying to do some more quickness and strength-based exercises to be able to add that quickness. I think that he shot the ball really well this year, and I think that he is definitely a good shooter. If he could take a further step as a shooter, I think that would also really help him. But again, like that's not a weakness of his game. I just think that, you can maybe improve upon strengths as well.
We're speaking with Sam Vecenie here on the Morning Rush. He covers the NBA draft, NBA, and college basketball for The Athletic. Sam, I remember listening to your Game Theory podcast with Cole Zwicker a while back, and you guys had a love affair with Isiah Joe, which obviously Arkansas fans really took to that. Now Isiah Joe is at 70 in your latest mock draft. Mace is at 76. Why do you think Isiah Joe has fallen so much this past season?
Yeah, I think the problem with Isiah is that he just didn't get a whole lot better this year. I kind of was hoping that the added weight, I think he added something like 15 pounds in the off season, and I was hoping that in addition to improved skills as a ball handler, would kind of round out his game, because the big things the NBA is looking for right now is we're all looking to find shooters, right? We're all looking to find guys that can really space the floor. And I know Isiah shot 34 from three this year. I'm not real worried about Isiah shooting the basketball. I think he's definitely a great shooter, but I am a little bit more concerned about the rest of his game after kind of seeing what happened this year. I mean, I just talking to NBA teams, I think that it's a pretty real question as to whether or not he would get drafted if he ended up coming out this season.
Sam Vecenie with us here on the Morning Rush, talking NBA draft and college hoops. He works at the Athletic. The G League, the NBA's changed the rules so high school players can go directly to the G League if they're selected. What effect do you think this has on college basketball long term? Because obviously, if 5 or 10 or 12 of the best players a year opt out of college basketball, it's got to water down the product, Sam.
Yeah, right now I think that the effect is pretty minimal, just because we've only had 3 guys that really truly matter in the context of college basketball, maybe only 2 to be honest, in Daishen Nixon, Jalen Green, decide to go down this route. Long term, I think it just depends on how many kids that they can convince to take this route. I think it certainly works to water down the relevance of college basketball. I mean, I don't know how you guys felt this year, but certainly on my end, it felt like college basketball was even less relevant than what we've seen previously. Like, I honestly can't remember a season that just didn't have as many compelling storylines, didn't have as many compelling characters. Like, the basketball itself was as poor as I've seen it in recent years. So I think that, stuff like this just continues to water down the product a little bit, but ultimately college basketball got through the 8 to 10 year period where prior to the one and done, high school kids were able to go pro. And at the end of the day, I think that the bigger issues college basketball has to struggle with are name, image, and likeness, the ability for kids to make money off of themselves, and just generally kind of combating the feeling among elite level players that college basketball is a stepping stone as opposed to a destination.
Do you think in the short term, at least, the willingness or the desire to go play internationally with everything going on with COVID, are players going to be more reluctant to maybe look overseas internationally for opportunities?
Are you talking draft prospects particularly?
Yes, ones that don't make an NBA or a G League roster or have filtered out of that system. Do you think there's going to be reluctance to go play in China, to go play somewhere in Europe like we've seen many players do previously?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's going to be a reluctance based on coronavirus and the pandemic. There's certainly some guys I've talked to that want to stay closer to home if they can. But more than that, I think the bigger thing is just that there's a real chance that a lot of these leagues end up having to significantly reduce salary structures across the world. Like the NBL in Australia has already announced that next season all of their players are going to have to take a 50% haircut in terms of pay. So I think that more than anything, how the salary situation shakes out in terms of professional basketball overseas is going to play the pivotal role in how many of these kids are going to be willing to go overseas to start their professional careers.
Speaking with Sam Vecenie here on the Morning Rush. Sam, Commissioner Goodell handled the NFL a lot different than many anticipated. How do you think Commissioner Silver handles the NBA draft and potentially the return of the NBA season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the NBA draft is going to be just like a continuation of how they decide to handle the season. The lottery and combine were obviously postponed, and until we know what Adam Silver and company are going to do with the NBA season, you just literally can't have a lottery because you need to know if they're going to play, 3 to 6 more regular season games, because those games could affect the draft order at the end of the day. So until we know that, you can't have a lottery, and until you can't have a lottery, or until you have a lottery, you can't really have a genuine pre-draft process of trying to winnow down guys based on knowing where you're going to select. So, and knowing what teams are ahead of you in what order. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see what Adam Silver does. I think that there's definitely a true willingness on both the players and the NBA side to try and do as much as possible to make the season happen. Obviously, Roger Goodell was just in a much better spot than Adam Silver was entering this pandemic because his season was out of season. He hasn't had to make as many difficult decisions as Adam Silver has. Adam Silver is in a really tough spot, and I think that ultimately the biggest impediment right now to the season beginning is just testing. And testing has to be so incredibly widespread across the country to where the NBA feels like it can take up as many tests as it needs to be able to jumpstart its season without anyone potentially creating a situation where they're going to infect multiple players across the basketball ecosystem.
So, Sam, with everything going on with the coronavirus right now, how has your process with draft evaluations changed?
Yeah, I think that, it's a lot of tape watching. It's certainly trying to winnow down what guys are going to be in the draft, what guys are just testing the waters. That part of it has been a little bit more difficult to judge this year than in many years, if only because these guys that are legitimately testing the process don't really have an opportunity to be able to go out and work out for NBA teams and try to improve their standing for those NBA teams. So first it's trying to winnow down who's going to be in the draft, and then from there it's just watching a whole bunch of tape because there's nothing else to do right now. So that's basically the end of the day on the process here.
Sam, assuming there's no summer league in Vegas or Orlando, and I think that's a fair assumption, at least at this point, how does that affect players trying to establish themselves? Not only the new players coming out of the draft, but also those fringe players trying to make a roster. That's a great place to showcase your value as a player. That's got to be a real setback for those players that won't get those opportunities.
Yeah, I think that it's, just very early to be able to say that there's not going to be any sort of summer league. Like, does the NBA downshift it into like a fall league maybe and just decide, okay, we finished the season in August if they do end up finishing the season, or we finished the season on Labor Day weekend here in August, or here in, maybe mid-October. We're going to go ahead and do like a rookie camp. We're going to go ahead and do like a mini summer league out in Las Vegas. And then, starting at December 25th, we're going to do the normal start of the season, which typically starts at the end of October. I think that is still remains to be sorted out. If there was not a summer league situation, I think it's going to be a lot harder for rookies to get acclimated to the league, and I think it's going to be a lot harder for them to get acclimated to playbooks. And I would expect that, especially given that this draft class is not one that's particularly strong, we see a season next year where there are much fewer high-level impact rookies that perform within their first year.
So, Sam, assuming that Isiah enters and stays in the draft, he's entered his name in the draft, assuming he stays in the draft and ends up going that direction, do you think, because of all the wrench that's been thrown in the process, do you think Mace and Isiah are going to be helped or hurt by this? Because they're not exactly the most athletic guys. They're not going to be, there's not going to be a ton of combines and stuff. Do you think those two individuals are going to be helped or hurt by how the wrench has been thrown in this process?
Yeah, I think that Isiah would probably be hurt because I think that he's someone that could go into one of these workouts and just shoot the, cover off the ball, right? And a team would just fall in love with that, right? Like that would really be able to help him get the taste of him shooting 34% from three out of evaluators' mouths. In the case of Mason, I don't know that it helps or hurts him. I think that he's one of those guys that in these 3-on-3 games that typically happen in these pre-draft workouts, he's just so strong and physical that, he probably would be pretty well suited to playing 3-on-3 basketball. That increased space would probably help. It would help or hinder. In Isiah's case, though, I think that him not being able to go into workouts and really just knock down a ton of shots and make people remember that this guy is just an elite level shooter, I think that certainly hinders him.
Sam, do you have an opinion on Eric Musselman and his staff and what kind of developers they are of NBA talent?
Yeah, I think that they're awesome. I'm a big fan of Eric Musselman, and I'm a big fan of this entire staff. I think that you look at the work that they did at Nevada. NC State couldn't get anything out of Caleb and Cody Martin, and I think that Muss and that staff ended up turning those guys into NBA players. They turned Jordan Caroline from a center at Southern Illinois into a really good four-man that sometimes slid down into the five, and a guy who became a shooter and became one of the best players in the Mountain West Conference. They, you can go up and down the list. Marcus Marshall, Kendall Stevens. These are guys that played better under Musselman than they did at their previous stops. And, I think that his experience developing talent at the NBA level really helps them develop guys at a high level within the collegiate atmosphere as well.
Sam Vecenie covers the NBA draft, and college basketball for The Athletic. Sam, let me top off the interview with this. All eyes have been on Sunday nights, ESPN, The Last Dance. Rate the doc 1 to 10, man.
I would say just in terms of my pure enjoyment that I get out of it every week, I would say a really good 9. I love it. I'm having a blast reminiscing. In terms of a journalistic entity, maybe a 6. It's not incredible. I don't know that we're treading new ground here. I don't know that we're finding out anything we didn't know previously, but in terms of the way it's stylized, the way it's propulsive, you just feel like an adrenaline rush every time that you watch it. Yeah, a really solid 9, and I'm really glad that it exists.
It's good enough to watch twice each week. Watch it once, then DVR, watch it again. I think it's that entertaining, but you're right. As far as, are we really getting to the core of the truth? Maybe not.
I think Michael Jordan's production company, Sam, might have something to do with that.
It's fun to watch when we got nothing else.
Yeah, this was originally supposed to be something that was just going to play during off days of the NBA Finals, right? I think that says a lot about what ESPN thought of it at the time and thought the cultural impact of it would be. And because there's literally nothing else on in terms of sports content, it's kind of become a cultural phenomenon in a way that, is kind of swept the nation. It feels like everyone, even people that don't really love sports, I feel are watching it. And, even more than Michael Jordan production company, I feel just the fact that they sold it to Netflix plays a role here too, because they recognize that it's going to be more of a general audience watching this thing. They sold the international rights to Netflix, and I think it's going to be on Netflix afterward. They realize it's going to be more of a general audience watching this as opposed to a heavily engaged sports audience. So they had to keep it a bit more basic than what I would imagine is bubbling beneath the surface.
You can follow and read Sam Vecenie's work at The Athletic. He covers the NBA draft, the NBA, and college basketball over there. Also follow him on Twitter at Sam_Vecenie. Sam, we really appreciate the time, man, and be safe out there in L.A., okay, buddy?
Yep, you too. Thanks, guys.